Good morning, everyone. Welcome to The Broad Perspective here on the Broad Perspective Network. I'm Vivian Kamori.
And I'm Katie Curley Nelson.
We're glad you're with us today. We're going to be joined after our first commercial break by a gentleman of the name of Joe Dolezal with part two.
Part two.
Yeah, the follow-up of the Upanishads and magic.
We couldn't get it all in the first time.
No, we sure couldn't. We sure couldn't.
Let's hope we can get it in. I don't know that we're going to get it all in this time.
I know. Well, we'll probably have part 3 and part 4, and there's so much. And Joe is a brilliant young man. Mm-hmm. He really is. He is well read. He has studied a lot. It comes through. In addition to that, you can read all you want, but then there's this insight that you have and the ability to put things together. And I think that Joe has that.
That's something that is not in a book.
No.
Like, you don't learn that. That's something that you have as kind of a gift.
A gift, well said.
And I think that he definitely has that gift, as well as being well read, which makes combination for wisdom.
Exactly, exactly. And he is a very, very wise young man. And I know I personally have learned a lot from him.
And he's just a good guy too.
Yeah,
he's great to talk to. So I'm so looking forward to talking to him.
Very personable. I like him a lot. I like him and his whole family. His brother Jacob's a sweetheart. And they're just good folks, and it's great to talk to good folks. And he is going to join us in the studio today. So
Which he was just a speaker at one of your groups too,
yeah,
right?
Into, yeah.
Yeah. What is that? Maybe you want to let people know about that.
Investigating new transformational opportunities. Isn't much easier to say into.
It is.
It is. And Joe's has agreed to be, or had agreed to be our speaker on the same subject. Mm-hmm. And so he's...
So if somebody wanted to come to that group, what is it about?
Absolutely. We're on we meet the last Wednesday of every month at the Greenhouse Cafe at the mall. And we just have a whole array of different speakers, usually on subjects of metaphysics, new thought, just esoteric subjects.
Okay.
Usually provided for people to learn from and maybe pick up some new information, of which the Upanishads is definitely something that, previous to our last interview with Joe, I knew nothing about other than the word. Having seen the word,
right.
I knew nothing. And I know you knew more than I did, Katie, because I think you'd...
Only a little bit, but
Okay.
yeah, I mean, just going back with the ancient religions and learning some of that, but he knows in depth.
Oh, yeah, he sure does. He's actually read some of the Upanishad texts, which... And he'll enlighten us. He'll enlighten us more. But I believe the Upanishads were texts that were gathered together, and it predates the Bible. It predates.
Yeah.
Joe was saying perhaps Atlantis, Lemuria, maybe
way back.
Prior to our civilization. But
prior to our civilization.
yeah.
Now let's think about it. Prior to our civilization, what do we think that looked like?
Well, I have some thoughts about if we talk about Atlantis and Lemuria.
Yeah. What do you think that looks like?
I think they were amazing civilizations. I think that they were more of an etheric civilization that was perhaps morphing into the reality as we see it today.
Do you think there was a shift? Because I've heard that too, where they actually were a lot more advanced than we are.
Yes.
But then something happened and we lost that connection?
Yes. I think Dr. Jang deals with that in the Gaia Project 2012. He deals with that or talks about that in greater detail. It's been a long time since I've read it. I remember at the time it was very interesting, and I liked his insights in that. So that book is out of print now, and they have not republished. So you can probably get it on Amazon.com or eBay or somewhere that you might be able to pick up a used copy. It's worth reading, definitely.
Yeah. And there's a lot of other resources. I know Madame Blavatsky, The Secret Doctrine, she gets into very in-depth in Lemuria and Atlantis and
why do I know that name? I wasn't she
Mary Blavatsky. She was from the society.
The Theophanous?
Theosophy?
No.
Theosophical? No,
There you
that's
go.
not it. I'm saying it wrong.
Theosophist, something like that.
Society, right.
Yes. And Ojai. Didn't she have something to do with Ojai? And
yeah, and she and
Krishnamurti? Wasn't something, I think she was connected with Krishnamurti, maybe? I don't know.
Could have been.
Not, I don't know.
But I know that, like, Jordan Maxwell uses a lot of her works, has a lot of information from her as well, which Joe obviously has a connection to Jordan Maxwell, so it all kind of ties in. But But,
Okay.
so there's information on that out there. But I'm always curious as to what that was. What happened to that society? What was the downfall of that society? Are we approaching another downfall like that? Or are we evolving into the beings that they were at that time? Do we devolve? Do we have nothing to do with them? Is it a completely different type of race and we just sprouted up from something different? I just wonder about that. But I don't know.
Well, I wonder
All
if
the
Joe
answers
will
to
give
that.
us some insights on that
Perhaps.
when we chat.
But if this information comes from that time and they were advanced, that's why
Right.
we are so drawn to it, because it does
Right.
have, those nuggets of knowledge that we deep down know to be true.
Right.
And that's why the Upanishads have just resonated so much with us that, religions have sprung from it. We
Yes.
practically worship the words, so, or at least think that we do.
Right. Well, I think it's a pretty darn interesting subject, actually. I love learning about all these things.
I do too.
Yeah. Well, and then we're going to learn more because we're going to have Joe joining us to talk about it, and then I just feel it in my bones. It's going to warrant a part 3 and part 4 and part 5 and so on and so forth.
And he's just going to be regular on the show.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll tell you what, he's got enough information. He probably could talk for several weeks straight.
He probably could.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? We do need to mention, Katie, there's the Conscious Life Expo's coming up
That's
next
right.
weekend. It's going to be in Los Angeles on the February 10th through the 12th. And there's a post-conference on the 13th. So for folks that want to hear some of these speakers, Greg Braden, George Norrie, David Wilcock, George Tsoukalos, Lisa Williams, Danian Brinkley, Barbara Marks Hubbard, Lisa Garr. There's a lot of folks that are going to be there, and that's just a few. That's just a few. Those are some of the keynotes. If you want a chance to hear them, go. There's hundreds of speakers that'll be there, and you can pick and choose. And I think you can either get a whole festival pass or pay per workshop. You can go to consciouslifeexpo.com, and the phone number is 1-800-367-5777. Tell them you heard about it, their event on the Broad Perspective.
There you go.
Yeah, it's all good. Check it out. So what's our Broaden Your Horizons thing for today, Katie?
Well, I seem like I'm always trying to broaden my horizons. But
Yeah.
there's one website that I had come across. I'm not even sure how I found it. Information is. You stumble across these things. Well, there's a gentleman, I don't know if this is his real name or the name he goes by on the website, but it's Ben Arion, Benarion. And he has an e-magazine. I think he calls it an e-zine, that he sends out. And it's free to sign up. You do have to put your email address in there, obviously, because he sends it to you. I think it comes like once a week. And each week he sends out these articles. And they're not super long articles. They don't take a ton of time to read. But they're always really, really insightful.
Yes.
I mean, he is in tune. I don't know where exactly he's getting his information. I know he's got a lot of links on there. The actual website is ashtarcommand.com.
Command crew.
Yes, I'm sorry.
.net.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah,
the wrong
.net.
one. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
ashtarcommandcrew.net.
Yeah.
So, and Ashtar is ASHTAR, commandcrew.net. So he had sent something out regarding letting go of old beliefs. And how do you do that? Because we get so caught up in this construct and all the things that we've been taught. And I thought this was just so insightful that we cling to these things, but what do we believe? Do we believe this? Do we believe that? What's right? What's wrong? And one of the things he mentions is that you shouldn't spend time and your energy into something that doesn't fully resonate within your heart. And I thought, that's it. Well, that resonated within my heart, because I could feel that this information, you waste time spinning your wheels on all this information. And what are we really doing? We know it's not real because you can feel it in your heart that it's not real. So then we go with what really resonates in your heart, and you can follow that path. And I think it leads us to the right path of information.
I think that's interesting because we are being fed so much information at such a rapid rate nowadays. And some of it, who knows whether what's right or what's not so much. Whatever it is might be right for you. But it's constant. The stream of information is constant. And sometimes...
And what do you believe?
Exactly.
Do you take it all in and say, yes, it's all gospel? I mean,
right.
I have a hard time with that.
Oh, I have a hard time with a lot of it. Well, one of the things I see that this Ben Orion says there are so many things to believe. Which one's right? Which one's wrong? It says never put a moment of energy into something that doesn't resonate with your heart. Just what you were saying. The heart's an excellent guide. And that's true. It is. But I would also encourage people to discern if you're coming from your heart, is it from fear or is it from love? Because a lot of times what you do or don't believe is coming from a place of fear.
I totally agree with
I
that.
don't want to believe that's happened because I'm afraid that, and then that creates a whole different energy. So I guess I would encourage people, to resonate with their heart, but really understand where they're coming from. Are they coming from a place of fear that they do or don't want to accept information based on that premise? Because that's when I think it gets dangerous. You really got to understand where you're coming from. What's your impetus in that?
And I think that
belief?
comes back to that whole thing that we always say, know thyself, because when you turn around, you can truly know your indicators. Your heart should be an indicator. But if you're living your life in fear, that indicator may be tampered now. So just like you're saying, if your indicator is tampered with, then you can't necessarily trust it. You have to be able to trust your heart, but in order to trust your heart, you have to know who you really are.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, that's it for everything, isn't it?
Yeah, I know.
If you
like
know
we
who
always say,
yeah,
know thyself.
exactly. And if you do, then you do understand where your heart is coming from.
That's true. Well, and I think a lot of people have a hard time letting go of their old beliefs because they don't want to feel like I've invested my entire life in learning something that is all a bunch of crap.
Yeah.
You know? I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
and now you think, oh my gosh, I've been bamboozled this entire time. And I don't want to believe that. I don't want to believe that I've been suckered my whole life believing in something that is not really what it was. It's been totally misrepresented. And so what I'd rather do is just go ahead and hang on to those beliefs as opposed to learning something new and moving on from it.
Right.
And still, I think that still comes from a place of fear. I'm afraid now I'm a sucker. You know what I mean? And people just hang on to it and they cling.
Well, it's easier. It's easier.
And it's easier. You're right.
It is.
Do they want to see the truth? The truth isn't always easy to see.
No, it's not. And that's why I say it comes from that place of fear. You can believe in what you want when it resonates in your heart, but a lot of times some things that you don't accept is because it's a fear in you that you just can't deal with it. It's just too much. It's just too much to get your head wrapped around. And I've been there on some things.
We've all been there, yeah.
Oh, I that information's interesting, but I don't know if I can get my head wrapped around that. If I can really understand what they're talking about. Plus, it makes me feel uncomfortable. I might actually have to do something differently.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You might actually have to change.
Might have to change, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, people fear that too.
Yeah,
People
they do.
definitely fear change, and that comes from. But when you start making decisions based on fear, you can feel it. You can feel the resistance in
That's
your path.
true.
You can feel things aren't going right.
Right.
Things aren't the way they're supposed to be. You can sense it because you're making decisions based on fear. I don't care what it is, whether it's getting a new job or getting whatever. I'm going to get this job because I'm afraid I might not get another one. Are you making that decision based on fear?
Well, and that's really common. That's really common. And I think that we're being fed a lot of information right now that does have people afraid. They're, like what during the time of, we just experienced a couple of weeks ago, solar flares.
Oh yeah, right.
Solar flares. And so people are afraid, well, what's that going to do to our electronics? And there's fear that comes up. And then there's people
Can you
that
imagine though if our electronics went down?
well, I know
I'm
I'd
kind
be
of afraid of that.
I know. Well, I know how to build a Faraday cage, they call it, or a Faraday box.
Okay.
Yeah, and I said to the kids yesterday, okay, guys, I want this done by the end of the day. All you need is duct tape, aluminum foil, packing tape or cellophane tape, and that's about it. That's all you need.
And what is that? That's like the one little solar oven?
It'll keep your electronics safe. So and also if you don't want to be tracked, you can put your cell phone in there and they can't follow you because it isolates the signal that it sends out. So, yeah, Faraday cage.
But you didn't hear that from us.
No, you didn't hear that from us. Absolutely not. So,
That's interesting. But anyway, if you want to check out more information, it's ashtarcommandcrew.net. And then you can sign up for the free email. It's all free. He just provides the information. It's really, really good stuff.
Yeah, so get clear on who you are
There you
and what
go.
your heart's talking about and where it's coming from. We're going to be back in just a moment with more of the broad perspective and our visit with Joe Dolezal and the Upanishads and magic. Stay tuned.
Do you ever wake up and ask yourself what's really going on in the world you live in? It's time for you to be aware. It's the #1 alternative website on the planet. TruthIsScary.com. Daily stories. Log on daily to get the latest information on the stories that radio and TV wouldn't dare to cover. Experience our curriculum with over 20 topics from government conspiracies and extraterrestrials to meditation and nutrition, celebrity interviews. Watch exclusive videos with your favorite celebrities and find out what their alternative views are. It's your source for the information you won't find in the mainstream media. It's TruthIsScary.com. Log on today and be aware. TruthIsScary.com.
Welcome back to the Broad Perspective here on the Broad Perspective Network. We are preparing to visit with our guest today who is in the house, Joe Dolezal, which I can pronounce your name this time, Joe. I've been practicing. I know. Aren't you proud?
You do better than I do now.
Do I?
Oh.
When people, they say Dolezal and Dolezal and all this stuff.
I know.
I don't even know how to say my own last name.
So you're confused. I got it down, though. I've been practicing, you
She's
see.
mastered it
Yeah,
now.
I've mastered it, so it's good. It's good. Well, we're glad you're with us today because this is part 2. We had a lot of requests to continue our conversation from our show a while back about the Upanishads and magic.
Because we got a little off topic last
You,
time.
yeah, we did.
And so people wanted to
want
get
more.
more the
Kinda
meat
timed
of the
out,
conversation.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think we diverged off a tangent and kind of timed out, so we didn't get to
Yeah,
really.
we've been known to do that. You can ask any of our listeners on any subject. We've been known to do
It
that.
happens. It
But-
happens, yeah.
So is it you? It's Upanishad?
I think formally it's Upanishads.
Ooh,
I say
ooh.
you because just sounds weird. So I mean, at the end of the day, you're translating Sanskrit into English, so who knows anymore? But I think officially it's recognized as Upanishads.
Upanishads. Kind of like
I say
coupons
Upanishads.
and coupons.
Yeah, exactly. Is it coupons or coupons? Tomato,
know.
tomato.
Tomato, tomato.
Yeah,
I
okay.
Who
agree.
knows? Who knows?
And we're-
So maybe refresh as to what that exactly is, and
Okay,
then we can
yes.
get into the meat of what that is.
okay, so tell us, yes. Who
So-
are the Upanishads?
So the Upanishads are essentially commentaries on some of the most oldest scriptures known in the world currently, which are the Rig Vedas of the Hindus or the Indians. And essentially these commentaries consist of, the Rig Vedas, just for the audience knows, the Rig Vedas are essentially a series of verses which are a word which is called aphorisms. And aphorisms are just verses of truth, essentially, kind of like, Jesus said, seek and you shall find. That can be considered an aphorism. And basically the entire Rig Vedas is versed in such a manner where you get these successions of verses going down, down, and down. And then what happened as a result of that, because individuals in general, when you read a verse doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it. The sages, the yogis, the sages, and learned masters essentially created book commentaries on what this actually means. They went into the details, what this verse means, why does it mean this, and they substantiate the verse. Essentially, they expand on the verse. And that expansion, that commentary, is really what today we call the Upanishads. Why those Upanishads are really phenomenally interesting is for a number of reasons, and we can go on for hours about them. But the most interesting facts about them is because these adages really aren't anything similar to what we could even constitute as modern religion, because it's not allegory, it's not mythology. You know how we have Christianity, and some people interpret Jesus as being an allegory. Now, whether you believe that or not is one thing, but the point is we see these consecutive allegories. The myth of Hercules, David and Goliath. I mean, you just have these allegorical stories which are true. There are truths behind them, but unless you are, as they say, initiated into the truths, then you really don't understand it. And if you take those things for face value, then you can be heavily deceived as to what the real meaning behind it is. And the Rig Vedas and the Upanishads aren't so. They're basically certain statements like Jesus said, seek and you shall find, and it really elaborates and expands on that whole concept. This is what this means. This is how this relates to you. This is how you can better yourself. This is what your relationship is to your mind, to your ego, to your higher self, and ultimately to the absolute and God consciousness. So, the Upanishads really are very significant in that respect, and and one of the things, just like the recent lecture that we did, we talked about the Upanishads and magic, and that's one of the things that led me towards it, is my brief experimentation in telekinesis, which ultimately led towards a lot of like Kundalini yoga, a lot of this magic, and then seeing the correlation between it, which I guess I'm blessed to say that the Upanishads really expanded on heavily.
You mentioned, and I think for clarity for our listeners, because there are some who may not know what the Rig Vedas are.
Right.
So can we just throw something in there to kind of explain that as well?
The Rig Vedas are essentially, there are 4 Rig Vedas in the Indian culture, and the Rig Vedas are essentially, I guess, for a lack of a better term, it's not exactly, but it really is the Indian Bible, if you will. It's kind of their source of religion. It's the source of their scriptures, and what it is, again, it is really just a series of verses. What it really is actually chant. It's music. It's supposed to be interpreted as music. You're not supposed to read it as a literal book, but rather you're supposed to chant it as kind of a as kind of a mantra, if you will. And what it essentially is the origin of this literature isn't known. Earlier, somebody had asked me where, what the accepted date of this literature is. Currently, archaeologists will say it's around 6,000 to 8,000 years old. That's what they will formally admit. Realistically, I personally, my intuitive belief is that it surpasses this time epic. I don't think it's from this time epic. I think it's probably the remnants of Atlantis, or maybe some
Lemuria, perhaps?
Lemuria. I feel that it supersedes. It's not part of this time epic.
So it's a remnant left
I
from
think
a previous
so.
civilization.
I think it's a remnant, and I think what also happens if you study in the Hindu astrology, you have the Kali Yuga, which is we're in right now, and then the yugas before. I think the communication back then was a little bit more, I guess, if you will, more refined, meaning that they use more like thought communication, intuition, rather than spoken word. Because if you really analyze it, spoken word is a very degenerate form of communication.
Yes,
you
it
really
is.
can't, even if you're good at articulating, even if you have a very powerful vocabulary, there's still certain things like, I'll just make a very brief example. If you say "I love you," if you say that to your son, to me, to your husband, and then to your dog, you basically said the same thing, but the meanings are
Right.
completely different.
Totally
It
different.
just
That's a good example.
right, and it just
Yeah.
goes to show how vulgar, how degenerate articulation or verbal articulation really is. And so, what I feel is that when we refer to these ancient or more older civilizations on the face of the planet, I think that they communicated more telepathically. I think things were more intuitive in the respect of communication.
And you were even saying the difference between Sanskrit and into English.
Right. It just degenerates completely, right?
Completely.
And when right now I've been studying the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. I'm kind of redoing because I've actually studied it before, and I'm kind of getting back into it. I like to study things, leave it alone, because I feel like your mind does something where it
For
learns
sure.
it more, and then I get back into it. And they even say that there's so many words that are just grossly mistranslated, and there is no translation. Like karma, for example, people think karma means like action reaction. It doesn't mean that. Karma, and then there's a definition of karma means duty. Well, yes, but that's not the full story. Then there's another one that means karma means action. Well, yes, but no, not really. Karma is it's a very they spend 500 pages alone just describing what karma actually means, and what it essentially, what you can boil it down to is essentially the intention, like we talked about. We all essentially came from the absolute, God consciousness. That's where we came from. Something happened where we broke away from that, and then we have to take in a human form because we wanted to assert our individuality at a conscious level. This is much more than psychological we're talking about here. And then that consciousness wanting to assert itself in an individual form took the human body, and now we're doing experience. We're trying to experience certain things because intuitively we know we're that thing that we're trying to experience, but we've forgotten it, and so we're trying to experience it in the phenomenal form. Karma, what that comes down to, it's not necessarily action, because you can't take going to the bathroom isn't karmic. That's just a necessity. What karmic really is, it's intention. What's your intention? If you have intentions, because what you're doing is you're kind of projecting really an invisible force out there. So if you want something good for somebody, something good's going to come back to you. But if you want something bad, then something bad's going to come back to you. So it's really more intention than it is strictly action. It's not really action as such. Now, the reason for that is because the universal law is equilibrium. Everything tries to equilibrate itself, and that's the cycle of life. That's why anytime civilization rises, it has to fall. It has to. There's no other way. There's no such thing as permanence in the phenomenal world. There's actually a great adage that a sage said, that there's nothing permanent in this world but change, which I thought was kind of interesting, because it just gives you a perspective that, all our efforts in the end are futile, but they're not. Then the only objective should be to try to reach that absolute again through whatever effort that we can, because as much as you want to make money, or you want to create a civilization or do a revolution, ultimately it's going to dissipate into nothing, just like everything already has.
That's
Okay,
interesting.
I got a
actions
question.
actions
Yes.
speak louder than words, but intention speaks louder than that. Is that
Than
what you're
actions.
saying?
Right.
Right? Okay.
Intention. It's exactly. It's not what you do. It's why you do what you
Why
do.
you do
And that's
what
kind
you
of even
do. I
law.
like it,
When you do legalities, if you kill somebody, they're not there to test. Did you kill somebody? That's assumed. Why did you kill him? Was it accidental? Was it anger? Was it a hate crime? Was it a plot of murder? Because then it's like, if you kill somebody and it was self-defense, you'll walk off scot-free. If you killed him because he was black, you'll probably get 25 years. It's just like, it's not what you did. It's why you did what you did.
That's interesting.
So next question that this alludes to. So I go in and I rob a bank.
Right.
And I rob the bank because I want money to feed my family. My intention is we are broke and we're losing our house and I want to feed my family.
Right.
However, in robbing that bank, I've taken money from people that also need to feed their family and have food on the table, and perhaps there's not FDIC.
Right.
And so there's people that are hurt in that process of my actions.
Right.
My actions, even though my intentions were noble, I guess.
Right.
I'm trying to take care of my family, but I've hurt people in the process. How does that affect my karma?
I would say it's a much more complicated question than because
It is.
because it is, because I understand, but what immediately popped into my mind was about 20 certain chain reactions and relationships that you had in that person, because what it comes down to is, first of all, okay, you did what you needed to do. Is it wrong? I think I don't think I personally don't feel there's any such thing as good and bad. It's not
Right.
I
about good
agree.
and bad.
Agreed.
Because, is it good that the banks loan money out to you for usury? Which is basically like fabricating, taking excess energy from you. Is that good? Is the existence of a bank a good thing? Is the fact that you're hungry a good thing? Are you just reacting merely to a certain cause which you don't understand? And that's why I don't necessarily think that's. I really wouldn't interpret that as a bad thing. I really wouldn't, because what it comes down to is not necessarily individual action, but it's why you're doing what you're doing. There, and we've talked about this before, where there's a saying in in certain spiritual adages, where spiritual law surpasses ethics and moral law. And so what I guess it comes down to, and this is another reason, like we talked about, why I think the New World Order is so successful, is because they believe their cause is a spiritual cause. It's not about country. It's not about nation. It's not about money. It's about God. God wills our undertaking, which is actually written on the back of the dollar. If you guys, right underneath the pyramid, that's what that says. God wills our undertaking. He's basically literally saying God is favoring our actions. So screw what you think, And what's interesting is you see that they're successful despite the fact of millions of people opposed to their actions. So what I think it comes down to is that if you do what you're doing for a spiritual reason, a higher reason, and you genuinely believe it, who's to say you're wrong? And I know it sounds like a vague and ambiguous answer, and in some respects it is, but I think that's what it comes down to. Even, like Albert Pike said, there is nothing higher than reason itself. There is no reason for reason other than reason itself. Like, that's the purpose, that we have this duality, and then beyond duality is the absolute, but that's inexplicable. It's something you have to experience. But it's nothing that you can articulate into words, and everything in that is just a dance of the cosmos. I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. I really don't. I think it's indifferent. They're personal objectives. What is hurt? What is that? Like, if you really want to get metaphysical, if you steal from somebody, if I steal from them and they never recognize that I stole $5 from them, was anybody really hurt?
But what if they do?
What if that was a karmic deliverance too? What if the whole reason was because you were supposed to take that, because maybe they were supposed to have $5 taken from them, because maybe they did something to somebody else?
And then that goes back to what we even talked about in the lecture a little bit earlier, that everything is exactly the way it ought to be. You just have to rearrange your perception and understand and accept that. Understanding is it what it is, and that's why I don't. That's why I don't personally get mad about the whole New World Order thing. I think people, they've been playing victims, they've been playing verdicts, and there's nothing for free in this world. You've got good housing, you had good housing, good food, good all this, and it came at the cost of slavery. Albert Pike probably said it the best in Morals and Dogma: a nation will always sell itself into slavery to justify its own passion and vindictive behavior. Always. It's
Interesting.
Wow.
never an exception. And America is a perfect example of that. They sold
Yeah.
themselves into slavery to justify their own passions.
Is that ultimately the goal, that we're all slaves? Do you think the control part of it?
Ultimate goal of what?
I guess the leaders that are in control.
Yeah,
the
they want to
elite.
keep you as slaves, right? Because they want your energy. That's what it is. It's much more profound than just, than just work for me because I don't want to work because I'm lazy. It's not like that. It's much more profound. It really is an energy. You have to understand that when you get, just think about if you have an idea and you want to actualize the idea. Let's say that you want to conquer somebody or you want to build a house, and you can get one person to work for you. That's that much more energy accumulated that you have a person working for your cause. Now, if you have 5 people, that's that much more energy, and it's not about the manpower that does it. It's really about energy. It's like a tidal wave. If you have a drop of water, you're not going to feel it. But if you have a billion drops of water creating a tidal wave, you can consume an entire city. And that's what it comes down to. Your energy is what gives them life. The entire process is based on faith alone. It's based on your consciousness, your energy polarizing to their idea. This whole thing is their idea about suburbia, about taxes, about buying food, about credit cards, about driving, gasoline. That's all their idea. And it doesn't matter. And that's why I said, unless you're willing to truly extricate yourself out of it by just bypassing their system, you're not doing anything. If you think you're driving a hybrid and you're helping the world, you're not doing anything. If you think you're driving an electric car, you're not doing anything. You're still paying them taxes. You're still paying them taxes. You're still using their byproducts. You're still being regulated by them. You're still paying annual registration. You're still getting a citation when you do something out of line. And so, unless you're truly willing to set an example by going out of the system entirely, then
Do the Upanishads address this? Do they?
they do, and they do spiritually, because they liberate the consciousness from the phenomenal necessities of life. Ego, about needing a house, needing a house in the respect that you want to justify your ego by looking better than the Joneses, or getting that car that makes you look better than the Joneses. Because what it does is it takes the internal consciousness and reverts it back into itself to try to discover yourself, and then with that respect, then what it really does is the whole attempt of the Upanishads is commentaries on the Rig Vedas, which is the objective of it, which is to liberate the consciousness from the phenomenal world, so you can sublimate back into the absolute, from which we came. That's the whole objective of it.
We're going to talk about liberating the consciousness in just a minute when we come back after this commercial break. Stay tuned for more of our visit with Joe Dolezal.
It appears we may be living in turbulent times. Are you prepared? Find out. Go to www.72hours.com. That's www.72hours.com for more information on home safety, pet safety, water, resources, training, and community support. We can always hope for the best, but it's good to be prepared for the worst. Get involved, get ready, get informed. Go to www.72hours.com for more information.
This is brought to you by The Broad Perspective, a public service announcement. Welcome back to The Broad Perspective here on the Broad Perspective Network. I'm Vivian Kamori.
And I'm Katie Curley Nelson.
And we're continuing our visit with Joe Dolezal, and we're talking about the Upanishads and magic and just about everything else in between. But one subject leads to another, and the Upanishads deal with a lot of it. So when we broke for a break, we were talking. We broke for a break.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
I like
that alliteration. Yeah. We were talking about, what were we talking about, Katie? Do you remember?
Something to do with consciousness.
Oh, there you go. Consciousness. That was it.
About consciousness and the potential
Yeah.
karmic ramifications
There
of
you
robbing
go.
a bank that would affect 10 other people.
Well, there you go.
That's what I meant to
That's what
say
it goes.
right
Yeah.
there.
And so I guess the conclusion was that, it comes more to a metaphysical question. What is good and bad? If I shoot somebody in the head, is that a bad thing? Because we see that if somebody tried to rape you and you did it, you'd be considered a hero. If you went to Iraq and did it, the army would consider you a hero, but the citizens would hate you. And if you shot a child in the head, then you'd be just considered a belligerent and everybody would hate you. Same action, different intentions. So what it comes down to is ultimately intention. Why you do what you do. What is the purpose? What's your objective? Why are you doing what you are doing? Is it for a greater good? Is it for a greater universal good? Or is it just for selfish intentions, which ultimately have no aim? And this is kind of what comes down to, even on, you see on the back of the dollar bill, God supports our undertaking. God wills our undertaking, meaning that when this whole, I guess, empire, if you will, the Illuminati, or whoever you may want to call it, the Vatican, or the banksters, the Rothschilds, when they go into these places and they do what they do, I mean, they really commit atrocities, to say the least. But somehow they're still in business. They still keep doing what they're doing. They get more powerful by the day, and all of their endeavors ultimately seem to reign in success. We can say why, and we can come to a plethora of agreements, but we have to recognize that their undertakings are successes for the most part. I don't like it. I'm not advocating it, but I'm saying that we ought to look into why. That's the big question, because once you figure out the why, it seems to empower you to a certain extent, because you seem to start to understand things for what they are and not for what you would like them to be or what you perceive them to be. And it really comes down to the fact, like you mentioned, if I go into a bank and rob somebody, is that good karma? Is that bad karma? There's no such thing. It's just karma. You created a certain impression by a certain action with a certain intention, and it's going to come back to you. Maybe not in the form of a robbery, but in an equally negative experience, which will inconvenience you in proportion to the inconvenience that you did to somebody else. It's not a good or a bad thing, like we've discussed before. Many of the spiritual traditions articulate or really express this, say that the human existence is a curse. It really is.
Yes.
It's somewhere along the line spiritually, in some point, thousands or hundreds or millions of years ago, our consciousness ultimately came from the same source. They call it the absolute. It's beyond God, because God is really an expression of spirit invoked. It's kind of like the divine intelligence, but there's something beyond it which is absolutely immutable. They call this the absolute, and this is where everything came from. Every living being came from. And because we, as individuals, for whatever reason, we wanted to express ourselves individually, and this self-assertion, this trying to express ourselves or be like God, what it basically did, the absolute said, fine, you want to go, goodbye. And this is what they call in the Bible the fall, paradise. This is basically breaking away from God, or the Garden of Eden. And we transmit it through certain, I guess, energies and frequencies into the human form. And this kind of has to do with Jacob's 7 ladders, for example. It talks about the 7 stages we descended from the absolute into this material form. And we have the 7 chakras, right, which are, then you have the Sahasrara, which is like the crown chakra and that kind of stuff. But it's very interesting to note these kind of things, and that's kind of what I like to dabble in too, because like you questioned, what is karma? Is it good? Is it a good thing, or is it a bad thing? It doesn't matter. Karma really is a type of self-expression. It's a type of assertion, rather, to try and maintain the ego. And that's a very hard thing to understand, because a lot of people love to say, I don't have an ego. No, you have an ego. If you're conscious of your body, you have an ego, because that's what it is. Ego is a Latin word which means I. It means the I. It means that you are conscious, self-conscious of your physical existence. The other side of that is phenomenal liberation, or conscious enlightenment, or realizing the absolute, or Christ consciousness, which is when your consciousness sublimates back into the absolute. Though you could be alive, your consciousness is back. Your consciousness is no longer there. Like when you sleep, you're not aware of your body. Let's say if you're deep sleep, you're not aware of your body, but you're still alive. But your consciousness is somewhere completely different. It's not until you wake, you're like, oh yeah, I'm a body again,
Right.
And that's kind of what happens. So, you can be alive as such, and your consciousness be sublimated back into the absolute, so you're actually in God consciousness again. And that's what the whole objective of life is. When you create a karma, you can go on forever. They even say that in the Upanishads. You can take one birth, or you can take a million births. It's irrelevant. There is no time. In the land of infinity, as they say, and I love Albert Pike, because he makes these wonderful poetic adages. He says that, I guess he says something to the extent that time is nothing but a point on a line which is infinitely far as it is infinitely back, meaning that you really don't ever move, And it's kind of an interesting perspective, and I feel the same way about it. I think that ultimately, when we talk about things like karma and good and bad, all you're doing is polarizing to this side. What's good to you isn't good to me. What's good to me isn't good to you. It doesn't mean anything ultimately. We have to substantiate a certain conscious state which has more quality than quantity, and that's when we really can start actually creating some kind of a positive solution, rather than argue this is good or this is bad. Ultimately, you could always figure out, this is what it comes down to. If you're not where you want to be in life, obviously your opinions are not in accordance with the universe. Obviously. Just take it that way. So that's one thing that always led me, if I'm not where I want to be, then look at somebody like where you want to be. So if you want to be super successful, do what they're doing, because obviously what you're doing isn't right. That's obvious, because you are where you are.
Right.
I mean, that's a simple way of looking at it.
You've created it, so, that's your intention.
Pretty interesting, and which I think could lead us to a whole other conversation that
See,
could
we're
last.
doing tangents again.
I know, but they're apropos, they're appropriate, because the Upanishads deal with all this. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, because I think it leads to this question, Do the Upanishads deal with the issue of, I want to say, forgiveness, or
Right.
once you understand what you've been about, and perhaps it's something that you don't like, you want to shift that. I want to be a different person. I want to be a better person. Can you change your karmic destiny by recognizing who you've been and be somebody different now? Do the Upanishads deal with that? Whoops.
Yeah, it does. It brings into light the fact that, there are certain, and this is my personal belief, but the Upanishads essentially corroborates with that you have, you basically are the makeup of your subtle energies in your past, meaning that you have certain natural proclivities which are easy to you and then certain which ones are difficult to you. Everybody has them. And what that means is essentially what you're supposed to do, the idea is that you're supposed to take your pluses, the things that you can do, like in my case, whatever I can articulate, I'm intellectual, so you should take that and help people on a mass scale to redeem the negative karma, and then your consciousness will naturally sublimate as you're helping people. That's the objective of it.
Okay.
And so if you're good in radio, you keep doing radio, you bring a lot of people to the table, because what happens ultimately is you act as a conduit between the unknown world, which could help people, and the vast majority of people that would love to be helped, but they can't. So you're a conduit, because maybe for whatever reason the stars designated you as a type of radio communicator, in whatever respect. So in that respect, it's not, you see some traditions practice, harsh asceticism, which means that you go off to a cave and you meditate by yourself. You don't talk to anybody for 20 years, and that is an effective method. But, and this is the problem with religion, you cannot prescribe a universal remedy for everybody, because everybody is completely different karmically. Karmically, we're absolutely different. Everybody comes from different backgrounds. I could have been a mass murderer. You could have been a saint, that it was almost there, but you kind of lost your way. I mean, you don't know, that's the
Right.
point. You can know, because when you look at your natal chart, it'll tell you a lot about where you came from. That's what I do. If you look at your natal chart, like, and then your celestial chart, your astrology, there's these theories that the stars basically predictate you're coming in back into this world. So you're a
Right.
spirit, and then when the stars come in and you come into a certain birth, then basically the stars are aligned, and those are really your proclivities, your better tendencies. And you have good ones, you have bad ones. Everybody does, but they're completely different.
Now, I've also heard that you chose that. So, like,
Yes,
you say,
yes.
this is what I want to work on. These are the karmic issues that I'd like to
Right.
work on. And so I'm going to be, in this body and then work on those things
And
and work those
it's
things out.
beyond choice. It's like a willful choice, but it's also an absolute necessity, because your intuition understands that, home is not here. Home is,
Right.
somewhere out there. So it's kind of like you do, but, if you don't, then you're just going to stay in a state of limbo, which, nobody wants to do.
So if that's the
spiritually.
case, so I'm kind of like just working this through my head with the whole, it's a curse to be here, but yet there's an expression here that we need to go through in
Right.
order to
Because of that initial
evolve.
self affirmation, where if for whatever reason maybe the consciousness was curious, it wanted to experience phenomenality, whether it be drinking, having sex, partying, watching television, or whatever, the infinite things that the universe can offer. That initial consciousness wanted to experience that. It wanted to come back to it, and that's kind of a mystery. They say they don't know why. Every
Gotcha.
scripture will say that they don't know why. It just happened. Like, why did God create heaven and earth? It just happened. It's part of the universe. And just like Albert Pike confirmed, there's nothing higher than reason itself. Reason is the reason for reason. That's what it comes down to. You can't know anything beyond that. And so what essentially happened is that the consciousness broke away, and then we all have different paths. You broke away for a different reason. You broke away for a different reason. I broke away for a different reason. But what we should do, the objective is, as everything is really a closed cycle, a circle, a loop, then the objective is to go back to God consciousness, which is, all of our efforts really do demonstrate. You want to help people through your method for that reason. You want to help people. I want to help people through my prescribed method, what comes easy to me, so we could essentially refine our consciousness to the extent that we do become God consciousness and kind of go back to where we came from.
I think sometimes, though, when we're trying to help people, sometimes we're also judging at that point, too.
Oh, yeah.
Are
Oh,
they
yeah.
less
Of course.
than? Now
Yeah.
I need to inflict
Of
my
course.
views,
Right.
and you're not what
Yes.
you should be, so let
Right.
me help
Right.
you. And that's where
But,
the whole,
yeah,
like,
the-
sometimes organized religion gets in there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Patanjali's, in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, he mentions that you have to be extremely vigilant and careful about that, because especially when you do start ascending intellectually and spiritually, there's that very easy tendency to judge people. You could say, oh, I'm right, look what I can do. I can do magic, I can levitate, I can cure, so obviously I'm right and you're wrong.
I see it all the time.
And you have to be very, very careful, because you see this in the spiritual movement heavily. You see this.
Oh,
I
yes.
got the answer. I communicate with extraterrestrials or the aliens or the divas or whatever. And, obviously I'm chosen and you're not. And it's just
Exactly.
like, you're much worse than, the worst of the worst. And you are exactly what you're fighting against. It's just like you see the
How
people of the
sad, right?
Illuminati, and you really become your own worst enemy.
Right.
it heavily cautions and advises against that, and that's why you kind of have to learn to accept things as they are. If somebody wants help, help them. Otherwise, leave them alone. And it's selfish, but it isn't. Because
Right.
other than
We've
that,
talked about this. We got
Right.
an argument about it because
Yeah, we
we
did.
were saying the same thing. And
Yeah.
I was like, if they're starving, but you know what? That may be their choice to be
Yeah.
doing that. Who am I to say that they're less than anything?
Right.
You know what I mean?
And it
Remember
comes
we
down
were
to,
talking-
I know,
if,
yeah.
if you can help somebody and they want help, that's a different situation.
Right.
But to impose
Yeah.
help on somebody, now you're just doing the whole savior Jesus thing, And you are. A lot
Yeah.
of people are like, I'm going to help you. It's like, why don't you help yourself? Leave them alone.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fine line. It's a
It is
balance.
a fine line.
That's
That's
a
where
tough
it's
one.
tough.
It's a tough one.
Because you can't help somebody who doesn't want to be helped.
That's
If-
true.
If you got an alcoholic and he wants to drink alcohol and you're like, I wish I could save him because it's my dad and he's going to die if he keeps drinking. If he doesn't want to help, you're not going to help
There's
him.
nothing you can
You
do.
can hide it from him. You could lock him in a chamber. You can get it. You can beat him. I've seen it all the time. If a person doesn't want something, they're not going to get it.
It's true.
And if they want help, they will help themselves, and you could be there along the path to kind of assist them. But ultimately, I mean, think about it. You have to help yourself. When you started this radio station, sure, people at the radio station told you this is a good mic, but you did everything for yourself. I mean, ultimately,
Very
you've
true.
got to do it for yourself.
Yeah.
So.
No, you're absolutely right. Wow.
Yeah.
How'd you get so smart?
Upanishads.
Yeah, okay. It looks like it's time for a commercial break.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be back in just a minute with more of our discussion about the Upanishads, magic, and Joe Dolezal. Stay tuned.
BPN. Join the awakening.
The Broad Perspective Network is a portal designed to reveal a new perspective and reality to those who wish to know the truth about the world we live in and our role in it.
BPN. See beyond the illusion.
Welcome back to The Broad Perspective here on the Broad Perspective Network. I'm Vivian Kamori.
And I'm Katie Curley Nelson.
And we're heading into the final phase of our conversation with Joe Dolezal, talking about the Upanishads, and we haven't even touched on magic yet, Joe. So let's talk about how magic ties in with the Upanishads. How's that work?
So, this is, one of the things that we talked about a little bit earlier is the magical element of the Upanishads. And what's interesting is, since the Upanishads really are commentaries on instructions on how to get from A to Z, how to get to the ultimate goal of life, which they call God consciousness, is that you pass through a phase at the higher echelons of your spiritual journey. You pass through a phase where magic actually becomes a real life practice within yourself. And by magic, we essentially refer to the electromagnetic dynamic, the electromagnetic force within your body actually becomes activated in a more subtle sense where your will can control that, and you can actually utilize it. You can project it forward and and do many things with it. Now, what's interesting about that is that when we talk about magic, it actually comes to even a logical conclusion because, the body is an electrical being. It's an electrical battery. That's what it ultimately comes down to, And, for all the physicists out there, you probably will recognize, and I'll say this even for the layman, but magnetism is actually a byproduct of electricity. So when you have an electrical current, the natural byproduct is magnetism. They're actually the same force, really. It's just a different expression. There's some theories in physics where they say there's the electromagnetic, which are two forces, but really most physicists come to the conclusion today that electromagnetism is one force and not two forces.
Really? Wow.
It's essentially just a different expression of the same force. Now, what's interesting about that is that when we, and you can even see this in modern day application, like if you have a tungsten light bulb and you have a surge of electricity run through that light bulb, it creates a mini magnetic field, but more importantly, it actually starts emitting photons, and that photon is light, which is interesting because when we start getting into the stronger electrodynamics, the electromagnetic dynamic, and it becomes stronger, then we actually start emitting light, which is kind of like the halo that you see behind the saints and Jesus and all the sages and all the yogis. That light that they always portray in the picture, that halo, is actually, according to at least lore and mythology, it's actually real light that's emanating from the person because they've become so attuned because that electromagnetic dynamic within themselves became so powerful. Wow. So yeah, I mean, it's very interesting stuff, and I don't.
So what happens to you physically when that happens? I mean, you actually vibrate on a different frequency, correct?
And what happens is, physically, you have to understand when we talk about this type of spiritual enlightenment, your consciousness is much different from the physical body. They say that the physical body is essentially the most outer sheath of the situation, and then when you go farther in, you have the mind, then you have the ego, then you have the intellect, and then you basically have the astral dynamics to you, which has to do with the dynamics, which is the Kundalini activation or the pranic activation, which is kind of at the electromagnetic realm. And then there's the soul. There's the you, which is that conscious, undifferentiated consciousness, which came and then will ultimately go back into the absolute. And that drop of consciousness, if you want to call it that for lack of a better term, is really what gave birth to this entire physical being. And attached to that is all these magical properties, the electromagnetic force, the ego, the body, the physical sheath. So to answer your question, what happens to the body? The body essentially looks the same from the outside. It's more of an internal feeling. It's a type of tingling that you get. If you ever try to meditate, which is really meditation is the byproduct of really a super form of concentration, which is pretty difficult, but you can do it. Then it really from the inside as the person, you'll really feel a type of tingling vibration, a really like light tingling, very calm but very aware tingling vibration, and this is a result of concentration. Interesting thing about meditation, just kind of a fun play on thoughts, is that if you ever wondered like how you even learn stuff, like we're talking about grade school stuff now, like how do you learn that 2 + 2 is 4? Like think about it. Like I'll tell you 2 + 2 is 4, but where did that information come from? It's kind of an interesting process, because think about it. As you're learning, you don't know what 2 and 2 is. You're just seeing some abstract scribbles, and then you're thinking, you're concentrating, and as you concentrate, bam, then you get an answer, which means that you meditated on it. You really became a medium between this side and some etheric realm out there we understand as the realm of knowledge, or the Akashic records, as Edgar Casey said, and you really tap into a universal source where now you've gotten knowledge because you meditated, you mediated between this side and that side. And it's kind of interesting that meditation isn't necessarily as abstract as we think it is. It's something that we've done a lot before. We're just not consciously aware of it. But what it really is an elaborated or more of an expanded form of concentration. So
is that connecting us to
the other side.
I guess the other side?
Yeah, the Akashic side, if you want to call it that for lack of a better term, the side of knowledge, because exactly that's what it is. You mediate or become a medium of.
Deep stuff.
Deep stuff.
Deep stuff.
Too deep.
I'm still in awe because you're very young to have accumulated all this information. I can't wait to see when you're our age where you will be. I'm
Maybe I'll be an auto mechanic.
Well, that'd be okay. You can work on my car anytime.
Exactly, like we talked about, right?
Seriously,
Tangents.
tangents.
We'll end up changing the oil before I leave.
No, but this is a lot of information that you have accumulated. I'm in awe. I think that you have an insight that so many people would like to have. They can learn from you, but I think it also requires a lot of self-study.
A lot.
A
Yeah.
lot
A lot of
of
it didn't come
self-study.
easy.
Yeah, I know.
I know if people might get a certain impression of me when they see me on the exterior, but the truth is I stay at home and I don't read less than an hour a day. I won't read less than that. And that's for, starting when I was like late teens. I started in what got me into my path, actually, ironically, was Brian Greene's The Elegant Universe.
Oh, yeah.
Love
Got
that
that book.
Super
Yeah.
cool book. I read
Yeah.
that when it first came out back
Yeah.
in 1999 or whenever, and I just ate it up. I read that whole thing in 3 days. And from that, it really went into conspiracy theories, and then magic, and then occult wisdom, then Golden Dawn magic, Morals and Dogma, Albert Pike, 800-page book, front to cover. I read it 2 times, and then going into more esoteric things in terms of asceticism, like Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, and then the Upanishads, which we're touching up on now, and then I've even done formal studies the body electric, which we talked about as well. So it's a lot of study. It doesn't just come through osmosis because God chose me. No, it's because I read a lot.
Because you've worked hard and you didn't sit around and play video games and watch TV.
Right. I do sometimes play video games,
Yeah.
but I got to get out of that bad habit. I stopped for years, and now I'm starting again. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, my kids would love you.
Yeah. Video games are the devil's work.
Sometimes it feels that way. Sometimes it does, most definitely. Well, since we're just about out of time, we want to make sure we get your contact information in so that people that want to
And
contact
information
you.
about the Pyramid
The
Center
Pyramid
as well.
Center, we
Right.
got to do
Yeah.
that. So
We didn't even talk about
I
that,
know, I know.
but then the viewers, they can go if you want to contact me directly, you can email me at Joe at thepyramidcenter.org. That's Joe at the pyramid pyramid center.org, or should I give them my number?
That's up to you. That's entirely
We
up
can
to
also
you.
post that on the website.
Yeah, post
so
it
they
on the
can
website.
always
Yeah.
Yeah, email
link
me
you
and
up
then
to your website too. 'Cause
and then they
have one.
could link up to the website at the same thing. It's www.thepyramidcenter.org.
And I'd encourage people to investigate the Pyramid Center because it's very, very impressive what Joe has done with that.
Do we have
thus
time
far.
briefly just to say what it is? Can you say it? He's a fast talker.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell us real quick what it is.
Yeah, what I essentially, I was very fortunate to acquire about a little over 200 acres in the San Bernardino Mountains of Southern California. I don't know how far your viewers go, but so I have 200 acres out there, and what I essentially want to do is it's a multifarious organization. One of the objectives is I want to create a model example of a self-sufficient community. So, for the people out there that really don't want to be, economic slaves out of necessity, then you can come to a place where, just like Thomas More in his book Utopia said, if everybody just worked 1 or 2 hours a day doing what
Right.
they loved and then pitch into a bigger hole, then everybody can take from that hole and, life could be much better. And then you could shift your values and your conscious efforts into something like the spiritual practice and not necessarily having to go get a job as a cashier because you need to pay your mortgage, That's one of the objectives. But the main objective, what I really want to do is I want to recreate what ancient Alexandria was, which is a type of intellectual, spiritual nexus, a community, if you will, meeting ground, but like a permanent meeting ground. If for your viewers, if you guys, we don't have time right now, but just Google search Alexandria, like ancient Alexandria, not modern day Egypt Alexandria, because I think it's like a fishing board or something. But what Alexander the Great established in 300 BC to about 380 until Papal Rome crushed it and stole all the books because it was too much opposition. But they essentially taught all aspects of spirituality, religious traditions, psychological traditions. I mean, it was really the gamut of A to Z of everything humanity. It wasn't even dogmatic religion as we understand it today. It was something truly unique. And from my understanding, nothing like it has existed since, since 300 AD. So I want to recreate that
Until now.
Until now.
until now.
That's awesome.
And you have resources, libraries, everything there, right?
Well, currently what I have is I've made the roads because we're out in the middle of nowhere. So I've made the roads. I have one prototype bungalow completed. I have a 1K electric system up to it. I'm working on the water situation right now, which if any of your viewers want to help me, I would love them to help me because I have an issue because we're on top of a huge hill where I have to pump the water up there. But God willing, I'm going to have, I could talk to a guy in Australia, which is going to get something called a ram pump for me, which is a completely self-sufficient gravity-fed pump, which could pump up 1,000 feet. And then after that, I'm going to start cutting some rocks and start building everything out of rock up there because I have a ton of granite. So, yeah, I'm going the whole nine.
Wow. And
Yeah.
so you're going to have a
Cool.
pyramid, though, obviously.
I'm going to have a pyramid. Yeah, the central focus of it's going to be a pyramid for like experimental purposes, for even running like to help facilitate meditation and stuff like that. So it's going to serve dual purpose. The reason I chose the word pyramid is because it actually means fire in the middle, which represents more like it's supposed to represent the generative quality of the physical universe. The reason they chose a pyramid is because the symbolic structure of, and I don't know if we have time for this, but what it essentially represents is the apex of the pyramid. The capstone is actually supposed to represent the nexus of this side and the other side. So it's like getting knowledge from this side and then dissipating it equally in equilibrium to the earth for the humanity. It's a very symbolic process, and it's a huge story of the pyramid itself, but I don't know if we have
Part
time for it
3.
now. Part 3.
Well, there we
But I
go.
don't know if we call it Upanishads and magic at that point.
No, we won't.
Right.
We'll call it something. We'll call it ramblings.
The
Ramblings.
Ramblings.
Tangent.
Ramblings.
The tangent.
Well, Joe, we're glad you're with us today. We want to encourage everybody to check out thepyramidcenter.org. Email Joe, and stay tuned. There will be a part 3.
Soon.
Yeah, we're very glad you're with us today. And, don't forget, yes, remember, it's all perspective. Join us next time and broaden yours. Thank you.